Hi, this is Edmund Bradford, and in this video I'm going to give you a bit more support around an area which some players find quite challenging, which is the whole area of decisions and in particular handling budgets. Supports or complements the getting started video, so we also cover how to make your first set of decisions in that video, so you can also check out that video if you're interested in seeing how to make a decision there. So if you don't already know, the way to get through to the decision screen is to click on that money button there. Okay, and that brings up the decision screen. It can also be accessed by pressing the decisions button up here. Now the first thing to note is that you have a annual budget to spend, and in this case for Big Store at the start of the game it's about £8.8 million is what the budget is that they've got for the whole year. Some of that's already been spent. About £4 million of it has already been spent, and the rest is left over to be spent in this period. And that, by the way, is a combination of what's already been committed to be spent, plus any extra budget left over from that total. Now your budget, by the way, is based upon the sales that you've achieved in the previous year. So if you start the game by having a really good period 2 and in particular improving your sales in period 2, that will give you more budget to spend in periods 3 and 4. So the better you can get started in this game, the better for your future budget. And of course that's real life in a way, because when you have a growing company you have more budget to spend, and on the flip side, of course, if you're a shrinking company, then you have less budget to spend. So try to get yourself into a virtual circle where you're growing your sales and therefore growing your budget, and therefore you should be able to reinvest that and grow your profits as well, and try and avoid the vicious cycle of shrinking sales and shrinking budgets and shrinking profits. Now, as I said in the getting started video, the key number to look at here is the bottom right number here, which is your budget for the whole year. You must always keep that in positive territory. If that starts going into negative territory, that means you're spending more in your full year than you've been given. We also divide your budget for the year in two, and we allocate 50% of it in the first 6 months and another 50% in the second 6 months. So when you see an allowed in period figure, that's simply half your annual budget. Now the interesting thing is that while you must keep a careful eye on this figure here and make sure that doesn't go negative, because that means you're overspending your total annual budget, you can, if you wish to, overspend your first half year budget. So when we get to period 3, when period 3 gets underway, and similarly when period 5 gets underway, you'll have an allowed budget for period 3 and also later for period 5. And you can, if you wish, overspend that 50% of your annual budget deliberately as a tactic to try and boost your performance at the start of the year. But of course it does mean you'll have less budget to spend in the second half of the year. Now we do set limits on to the extent that you can overspend your first half year allowed budget, and typically the limits are 75% of your total budget. So you can't spend any more than 75% of your total year budget in the first 6 months. To be safe, if you want to keep things within a margin of error, then I would say you should go up to about 60%, and that leaves you 40% in the following period. It still gives you a bit of room from 60 to 75, and also of course you can underspend your first half year budget as well, and do a 40-60 approach if you wish. Now if you do get into negative territory, and for example if you have a bad period 2, then you will find yourself starting period 3 perhaps with a negative budget. What that means is that your budget is now smaller than it was in the first year, because you're shrinking as a company, unfortunately. But of course this rolls forward your spending pattern from the previous period. So, and we do that simply to make it easier for you guys to put the numbers in. If you had a bunch of zeros here, then you'll just be tapping in all the numbers again and again, whereas with the numbers in there you can just alter your flight path effectively. So if you do find yourself starting a period with a negative budget, the first thing you need to do is to go into one of these segments and actually reduce your spend in that segment, okay, and clear down some of your spending pattern. And it really simply means that your high spending patterns of the past can't continue into the current year. So reduce your costs first. That will then bring your budgets back into positive territory, your remaining numbers into positive territory. And then once you've got that back into positive territory, then you can start investing the budget that you created for yourself where you wish. So let's take a look at one of those segments. I'll go back to the top segment here, which is the baby food segment. I open that particular decision input screen. So this is where you make your decisions, and as I said in the getting started video, you make your decisions in these 3 columns here, keeping a careful eye on your remaining annual budget. And in essence, the more input you put in here, the more resources you apply to any particular project, the more likely it is to get a better performance on the output of that. So these are the inputs, and your potential performance is the output. But as with many things in life, it's not a simple straight line relationship. In fact, there are hurdles that you need to clear to achieve a better performance. And you can see, actually, we keep it fairly transparent. You can see here by clicking on the dot button, you can see how much you need to spend to achieve a particular performance level. So you can see, for example, that if we spent £1,000 on people, we will get a performance of 0.1 in the current period and an extra 0.4 on top of that in the next period. But be careful, because this is the weighted spend, i.e. that's the your spend times the importance percentage that you've actually attached to it. So for example, if you've only got 10% as an importance figure on that particular project, the pricing project, you need to spend £10,000 to get this weighted spend of £1,000 through the system. So the data is there for you to see. Now what I would suggest to you is don't get too much in the details of all this. Being strategic, it's all about getting a helicopter view of the world, and don't get buried too much into all the detailed analysis. Honestly, what I do if I'm playing with a game is I tend to do it by trial and error. So I think about what type of performance I'm looking for, and look at my budget, and if I'm not getting the performance at the back end that I want to see, then I might double the resources and see if I get it. Okay. And if I'm getting too much performance, I might reduce the resources. Okay. As the game goes on, you can get more and more efficient about how you use your resources, but be aware, as I said, it's not a straight line relationship. It's more like a staircase relationship, and it's very true in real life about spending a minimum amount of resources in order to get a desired level of performance. Now you will get the performance shown here. The question, of course, is that going to be enough? And that, of course, depends on 2 critical points. The first point is, are you investing in the right areas? I.e., are these areas that consumers generally care about? So have you diagnosed the consumer needs effectively? And the second point, of course, is that it depends on how well your competitors are investing in that area as well. So if we diagnosed or thought that low pricing was really important to succeed in the baby food segment, and we put a lot of effort into that low pricing project, okay, and let's assume that's correct, so that's good, we're investing in the right area. But if our competitor is investing more aggressively than us in that area, then guess what? Their prices will end up being lower than ours, and consumers will go to shop with them rather than shop with us. So even though we're investing in the right area and improving our own performance, we may find actually we end up losing sales, losing market share, losing profits, because one of our competitors is investing more seriously in that area than we are. So keep a close eye on what your competitors are doing, as well as trying to be as good as possible, as accurate as possible in terms of diagnosing consumer needs. And also be aware that your performance here, your potential performance, is based on what you spent in the previous period. So at the start of the game you haven't really spent very much, we've got the same level of expenditure, but as the game evolves, particularly if you're, for example, reducing your expenditure in a particular segment and then decide to change that and increase your expenditure in a particular segment, that lag effect will still be there. So even though you're investing more as you change your mind, there is a lag effect from the previous period when you were paring down your expenditure. So just be aware that that effect will take place. And the other thing that I'll say here while we're on this screen is to make sure you keep hitting the save button. Okay, that save button, once you hit that save button, it means your data is safe on our servers, and you should get into the routine of pressing that save button fairly regularly. Certainly do not go for an hour or so making changes here carefully, and then you end up perhaps losing your Wi-Fi signal, and you have to do it all again. The other thing you need to avoid is making decisions very, very close to the deadline, when it's getting very, very tight in terms of when we're going to close the period. You should try and spread your decisions over the time you've got, and therefore make sure that your input is done in a very timely manner. And once you've made your decisions in this area, then you can actually go back to the previous screen and make decisions in other areas as well. Note, by the way, that there is a clear button here as well. That is what I call the nuclear option. If you want to completely exit out of a segment, you hit that clear button and it will bring all your input, all your resources down to zero in that particular segment. And that can be particularly useful, by the way, if you find yourself with very short a budget and need to exit out of a segment to generate some extra budget. So I'm just going to hit the return no save button here and move back to the main screen. And when you've made your decisions in a particular segment, you'll see the numbers changing here. Once you've done one segment, then you go to another segment and keep going through as many segments as you can in the time that you've got available. As I said in the getting started video, you've got a budget to spend. Any budget that you don't spend won't just disappear completely, it will go to profits. So for example, as you get towards the end of the game, you might want to tactically put a bit more money into profits at the end of the game, and that little bit of extra profit might end up giving you an actual advantage. It might actually take you into the winning position compared to the competition. And the other thing I'll say is that you don't need to be too radical at the start of the game. The reality is that you've just joined this company. You don't know very much about the marketplace. You don't know very much about your competitors' strategies. You're still getting your head around your own strategy. So I would just say to you in the first decision round, which is period 2, just limit your ambition and just try to continue executing the strategy that you've inherited as best as you can understand it. But then when we start the new year, which will be starting in period 3, and the new year of course is periods 3 and 4, when we start the new year, then of course you've had your honeymoon period, you've been in office for 6 months, you can start to see how your competitors are responding, and then it's your strategy. Then you can really start to be a bit more radical and thinking about what the right strategy will be for the future given the market conditions. And finally, as I said in the getting started video, once again, you should think about risk and think about your attitude to risk and think about your competitors' attitude to risk, and decide perhaps to try and take a slightly different route than your competitors. So if your competitors are all a bit risk averse, dipping their toe in the water, being very, very slow and cautious, maybe your approach would be we're going to jump out the starting gates with a really fast start, and in effect they're never going to catch us up. We will be leading this game from start to finish. Alternatively, if you think that all your competitors are going to be a bit more risky, then maybe you want to be a little bit risk averse and say, okay, well, let them do that. Let them fight over the marketplace between them. We'll sit back a bit, and we will, we will time our strategy successfully, because we have a few periods to run, and it's not necessarily who wins the first decision round, it's about who wins the last decision round that's the key in this. So maybe we'll just be a little bit more cautious than everybody else. And of course, in particular, you can even get into the psychology of your competitor teams. If anybody in your team plays poker, for example, that'd be great, because they can look around at your competitor teams, try and think about how they're going to play as a team, what sort of risks they're going to be taking, and you can adjust your risk taking accordingly. And so, like many things, like real life, strategy is partly about all the analytics and the diagnostics and the data and really good technical marketing, but also it's partly to do with really assessing the competition, really assessing the leadership qualities of your competitors, and adjusting your strategy accordingly. So I hope that was useful to everybody, and good luck in the game.